Hello and welcome to another of my terrain videos. As promised, I've got Mike here with us this time. I'm pointing the wrong way. Mike here with us this time. He is here because he has got some absolutely stonking 40k terrain, and also he's going to help me with a general rundown today through the history of the terrain of Warhammer 40k. As before, we're going to be building some cardboard scenery from the golden age of 40k terrain. Today we are building the Digger scenery, and as it happens, we both have a copy of. Mine's somewhat more trash than Mike's, but your box is basically mint. Mine is like someone sat on it.
Yeah, mine is a bit squished.
Yours is a bit squished. Mine, literally, I think the movers may have sat on mine when we were moving.
The funnier bit is I might have a second one that's still in its shrink wrap. I did pick them up from a bring and buy for about £5.
Yeah, I think that's
about 10 years ago, and I was like, "There's two, but I'll definitely use one," and it still hasn't been assembled. Remedying that now.
Yeah, I got mine at the it was bring and buy at one of the Warfare events. I got the Digger box and the Gorka Morka box for basically 20 quid, which bargain.
Yep.
Who doesn't love a game of Gorka Morka? It may well be that we'll get together and play a game of Gorka Morka at some point because it's awesome. And I've got like 5 copies of the rules at this point, and you've probably got about 7.
I've got 1 copy of the core rules and evidently 2 Digger books, but
I've got core rules and Digger the rule book, the other book, and the Digger book here behind me, and then I've got multiple spares of it in storage with my Gorka Morka box. Don't know if you remember, you know James, obviously James Hewitt.
Yes.
So James foolishly challenged me recently when I said to him, let's have a game of Gorka Morka, because he was appearing on a 40k podcast with the Painting Phase. I don't know if you've watched their stuff.
I have indeed. In fact, I watched that episode.
You watched that one? So you know he talked about Gorka Morka quite a bit in that. I messaged him and taunted him and said I'd give him a game of Gorka Morka next time I was up in Nottingham. And his reply was that he would only play me at Gorka Morka if we used the original Gorka Morka miniatures. The fool. I have a complete set of the original Gorka Morka miniatures, even with the ridiculous tiny bases that they had back then. So I am well sorted in that regard. But this is not a video about Gorka Morka. This is a video, despite that we're building Gorka Morka scenery, this is a video about 40k terrain. But okay. As before, I'm going to talk at you and Mike's going to talk at you as we build this stuff. I'm probably going to glue myself to it. And we'll just give you a whistle-stop tour of the history of 40k terrain. I'm going to go through it as best as I can remember it with various examples from my collection, various examples from Mike's collection, and at the end we'll perhaps have just a little chat about some of the standout pieces of 40k terrain that there have been over the years, in particular the stuff that the studio built appeared in the pages of White Dwarf. I'm sure that there's going to be some stuff that I missed. I have to apologise, by the way, for missing the Mighty Fortress out of my diatribe on the subject of Warhammer Fantasy terrain. I cannot believe, of all the terrain to miss, the Mighty Fortress kind of a bit of a big one to miss. I'm going to mark that down as just as planned and say that I'm going to come back and do a Mighty Fortress Warhammer Siege video that'll be separate to the terrain idea videos that I've done. See? Right, okay. First thing, I've got I don't actually have the instructions for mine, so I'm going to just build this as best as I can.
They're in the back of the Digger book.
Oh, no, hang on. Are they in the Digger book? Are they in the Digger book? Oh, I do have the instructions then. They have the Digger book.
Yes, I opened this up, looked through, and went, there don't appear to be any instructions. And then I realised that there's a great big book. They are like page 94 onwards.
There we go.
Look, when I say 94 and 95.
Instructions. That helped me so much last time. Okay, so I'm going to build the crashed spaceship. It says start with the boxy bit. So let's work out which one is the boxy bit.
Oh, they are labelled.
1A. That's 4A. Hang on, why is piece 4A on card sheet 1? 1 should be on 1, surely. 7A, 6A, 8A.
I think they just went on whatever fits.
We are 1A, the boxy bit. Here we go. Right, so we are building cardstock scenery, which comes from the Gorka Morka Digger supplement, but it's also, cardstock scenery, again, much like Warhammer Fantasy, cardstock scenery was where the terrain started for Games Workshop and for 40k. And to the best of my recollection, Second Ed 40k is where the origin of kind of terrain. I don't believe they'd released any terrain sets prior to Second Ed 40k. Does that match with your recollection, Mike?
I don't actually have a recollection before Second Ed 40K. That was where I joined in.
Okay.
So I am no use whatsoever in the Rogue Trader days. I know it existed. It looks good fun, but I never had anything to do with it.
Well, they still sell the Rogue Trader box at the rulebook, of course, at Warhammer World. I mean, maybe next time I'm up there for the Return to the Badlands event, maybe I'll buy myself a copy of the Rogue Trader book and we can get some games of Rogue Trader in at some point just to see what all the fuss was about. I mean, I didn't play Rogue Trader, but I have some Rogue Trader Marines kicking around the place. Only glue the tab. Ensure no glue gets on the edge below the tab. Okay. All right, let's get some glue on this. Trusty Pritt Stick to the rescue. Yeah, so first piece of card terrain that I can recall for 40K is the stuff that came in the Second Ed box set. I think you've still got some of that stuff. So that was the card ruins that were kind of grey stone and kind of tan-coloured sandstony brick. And that was released with the Second Ed 40K starter set. And then from there, they really kind of went to town on card terrain for 40K. So as well as the Gorka Morka stuff that I'm in the process of building here with Mike, there was a whole bunch of terrain sets, which I had one of them. I had the Imperial Bastion, which was kind of a big cardboard tower with some of the plastic Necromunda kind of bulkheads that they released. And then you had kind of a front piece from that, which was kind of a forward dugout, I suppose. Of that cardboard bastion, I found it. The only bit I have left is this somewhat squashed remains of the forward dugout. But I do still have part of the cardboard bastion. I don't have any of the important bits that came with it. Is it just me, or is this isn't a regular shape, is it? This is like longer on one side and on the other. It really does not look like
it's a crashed spaceship. It's not gonna be your normal shape, is it?
You can tap that out with a hammer, I reckon. So yeah, they released the Imperial Bastion. The Imperial Firebase was by far my favourite of the ones that they released back then.
I think I might have had that. It was big and blue.
Big and blue with a landing pad on part of it. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to look for part 1B now. 1B.
So I think I've made the mistake with this card stock terrain that I didn't buy a Pritt Stick. So I'm currently trying to super glue it together.
Oh, so some people on the last one, people commented to me and said that super glue would work much better than Pritt Stick. Are you assuming you watched my last one where I had a complete meltdown of things just gluing themselves to me more than to the card?
Well, I've just managed to get my thumb out from being glued inside this because Pritt Stick glues you less securely.
This is true. Well, it still is quite frustratingly sticky. It seems to be holding at the moment, so I'm going to move on to this air venty bit of the crashed spaceship, which again, bit of Pritt Stick on there. Yeah, so the Firebase, the Imperial Bastion, I think there was one other that they released, but we keep talking about Necromunda bulkheads, which will probably quickly I'll throw up a picture there of what we're talking about there. If you're watching this video, you must know what Necromunda is, but the terrain that they released for Necromunda when it first came out was amazing. It was this kind of whole cardboard underhive, complete with plastic bulkhead sections that you then slotted the cardstock into, but you could make this multi-tiered winding passageway with bridges and walkways and all kinds of cool stuff. And the plastic bulkheads themselves came with like ladders and footholds and stuff on to function in a kind of double pose way, as both ways in which your models can climb up and down the board and also ways in which they kind of held all the cardstock stuff together. They released that, and then they released, I think, a second set of card terrain for Necromunda when they released the Outlanders box. Yeah, that's right. When they released the Outlanders box, which was slightly more kind of rusted and corroded and scummy looking terrain. But there was nothing to stop you from combining all that Necromunda terrain together, or indeed using it with, whatever 40K terrain you had. But so, as far as I can recall, that was the cardstock stuff. And then there was a whole ton of cardstock scenery that they released with White Dwarf during kind of Paul Sawyer's run, which I hold up as being one of the best White Dwarf runs that there was. So when Gorka Morka came out, there was a Gorka Morka kind of watchtower that they released in White Dwarf.
That's where that came from.
Yes. Oh, I think I've got. Let me just check my copy of that issue of White Dwarf.
I had one. I had the watchtower, and I was like, I'm sure that didn't come in the original Gorka Morka box, because we're talking about the stuff in White Dwarf was amazing.
I don't have it. It's there somewhere, but I don't have it.
Everyone loves free scenery.
Yeah.
With the magazine.
Well, they released. So they did the Gorka Morka watchtower. They did there was like an Eldar pylon that they released around that time as well, kind of a black. I mean, it probably was marketed as an Eldar one. Actually, looking at it now, it looks more Necron. It was kind of black stone with Ankh type symbol on it. but it was marketed as like an Eldar Waystone type thing. And they did a shrine when Sisters of Battle were released. They did a full-on cardboard shrine as well. They even did some little kind of cardboard barricades, little kind of trench emplacement type bits in White Dwarf. I think it was 213. So there was a whole stack of a period of time where they were just pumping out cardboard scenery, which was awesome. But yeah, you meant this is coming unglued on me now. See, I bet you're having this problem with the super glue. I'm having to go back and re-glue parts of this with the breadstick.
I'm getting to the point where I thought, you know what, I'll hold it together with some of my needle nose pliers, and then I glue my pliers to the cardboard as well. It's not my fingers, but it's not helping.
This is the point where I find that the craft knife comes in handy. Is I'm going to try and pop out the little inserts. I don't want to come out, so I can slip the tabs through from there. But yeah, we mentioned the Gorka Morka series. So, I mean, I have the Gorka Morka Fort, but I may have to prevail upon your 3D printing skills because it's supposed to come with 6 of the Necromunda bulkheads to hold the Gorka Morka Fort card sections together. Mine only came with 3. So I managed to rustle up 2 more from somewhere else, but they were being used for something else. But if I could prevail upon you, if you do 3D print some of the Necromunda bulkheads, I would very much appreciate 3 of them so I can finish building my Gorka Morka Fort, and then we can use it in a game of Gorka Morka. There we go. That is the first.
There are some people who are much more skilled than me at 3D designing who have produced some very, very nice Necromunda bulkheads, which I have stolen to use in one of my designs.
Cool.
I'd say stolen. Not stolen. They were freely available.
They were freely available.
And as just asked for credit. So they are, if I ever release my 3D designs, they will be appropriately credited.
Excellent. And maybe if we do use any of them for anything, then we can just like put the credit in the description on the YouTube video.
Yeah.
Where the heck does this go where? Okay. Fold around the air duct sides and ends and glue into position with the tabs as illustrated. That is...
Is it one of those draw the rest of the owl moments?
The tabs are tiny. They are the tiniest tabs in the world. Who thought these were a good idea for tabs? That one's not too bad. That one's like,
you're obviously ahead of me. I built the boxy bit, which as you said,
boxy bit.
It is not very square.
It
is boxy. I'll give them that, just not square boxy.
This is the air duct, so I'm just going to hold that there while we talk a little bit more about 40k scenery. So we got as far as the Gorka Morka Fort and the Necromunda bulkheads. Let's move on beyond that to 3rd Ed 40k. So after the age of cardboard scenery became the dawn of the age of plastic scenery, and much like the 2nd Ed 40k starter box came with a cardboard set of ruins, the 3rd age 40k box set came with some plastic ruins. I don't have any of those, but Mike does. And he sent me a picture of them, which I'm going to throw up here now. Did you paint those yourself?
Those are dusty rather than painted.
Oh, right. Okay, that's not... you should have just claimed it was like really good dry brushing. It's authentic weathering.
Spray painted black and, weathered by age.
It's authentic weathering.
They are also slightly warped. Advice to everyone in general, don't store Warhammer models in a conservatory. Which is where most of mine lived for my teenage years.
Actually, not fine cast now, I imagine. God's only knows. They just kind of wilt into a puddle on the floor.
It got warm enough that I had to replace most of the models' bases at some point because they shriveled up and lost the
curled up and died.
Which is probably why my cardboard scenery also didn't particularly survive the lovely British weather of being very warm in summer in a conservatory and then freezing cold over winter.
Yeah, it doesn't do much good for your paints either, I've found.
No.
They don't like the temperature shift.
Is this even the right bits? Yes.
We're doing so well.
Is it one of the right bits? It's like I start taking it out and then I'm like, did I check that?
Right, well, I'm going to just hold that while we talk about 3rd Age 40k. So, as well as the plastic ruins that came in the 3rd Age 40k starter box, there was also some of the world's worst trees. So they were like tropical palm trees. I'm popping. You're going to be more glue in it, aren't you?
I might have.
You might have got some kicking around. They were these ridiculously spiky little plastic palm trees where the trunk was made out of individual sections. That if you brush them with your arm with the slightest breeze, would just shatter into a million pieces. I was working at Games Workshop Manchester at the time, and we had a 40K board that started off life like some kind of wonderful tropical paradise, palm trees everywhere, all around a flowing river. By the end of the summer, it looked like it had been logged out. I mean, literally, gamer kids coming in, people playing games of 40K somewhat roughly over the course of the summer. I snapped a tree off, never mind. Oh, no, that one's broken off now. And all we were left with by the end of the summer was the stumps all the way along the river line of that board. They were terrible. Yeah, there we go.
These ones.
They are just awful.
Yeah. And that was the bases.
Yeah, that was what we had left on the board at the end of the summer. Just those little plastic tree stumps. We replaced all of those with fantasy-style conifer trees made with glue brushes dipped in model flock. Much better. Stand up to any amount of abuse. Not the greatest plastic trees in the world. Less said about them, the better. But they did include them in both the 40K starter box and a few of the battle forces. I think, like the space back then, you got a bit of terrain in the battle forces. So in the Space Marine battle force, you got some plastic ruins. In the Dark Eldar one, you got some of those trees. The Catachan one, definitely, you got some of those trees. What they followed it up with next, and I think these are really quite cool. I've got some of these here. Much like they've done wall sections for Warhammer Fantasy out of kind of a vacuum-formed plastic, they did sandbags. I mean, in a pack of 6 sandbags, I've got a bunch of them here, which I've flocked, and I haven't done anything other than flock them. But yeah, they did essentially a sandbag line. I've got my sandbag line here. There's a 4 section of them. And these are great. I think these are got to be at least 20 years old. They've absolutely stood the test of time. They, at one point, I think, were glued onto some hardboard bases, so there's a bit of super glue still on the bottom of them. But yeah, those were a fantastic innovation that they came out with. And those were available for ages. I mean, I think they were available for about 10 years before they eventually replaced them with some other plastic scenery, which we will get to shortly. But that kind of advent of plastic scenery was pretty much the death knell for cardboard scenery. There wasn't any more kind of release of the cardstock stuff after that. I think probably in terms of cardstock scenery, Digonov may well have been the last of the cardstock scenery sets that they released for 40K.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that would be after that. Were plastic-wise, were the tank traps the same time as the trees? Tank traps and barrels.
Tank traps, barrels, and these little kind of plastic loading pads. And those, again, they were available for about 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not still available, are they? I mean, it might well be.
I don't know.
A single sprue in a plastic bag, basically, but it gave you some little tank traps and some plastic kind of fuel barrels, and I think there was some crates of ammo as well. I've got a set of them somewhere. I think they're in my Necromunda box. Heavily daubed to kind of bulk gun metal and a quick wash with black ink, and dumped in the box as they were back then. Right, that air duct seems to be, touch wood, seems to be holding. I'm going to move on from the air duct to the biggest and most impressive, the main hull assembly. So, okay,
I'm glad it's not just me that's doing this in entirely the wrong order, because I managed to somehow skip to the air duct, but at least I'm building the engine.
Oh, you've gone to the engine section. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, I missed the exhaust vents. I missed the air duct, the exhaust vents, and the engine. Okay. Well, no, scratch is going on to the main hull. Yeah, I'll just put that to one side. So I need parts 2A and 2B. That looked vaguely engine-like. That's 3.
This is good fun challenge of where on earth are these on the card, because like it's the same with sprues,
3A,
which everyone will have the fun of, where it's like I've got piece 11 next to it's piece 12. Where's piece 13? 3 sprues over, because that's where it fits.
Yes, I'm on the exhaust vent, so I want 2A and 2B, don't I? Where are you? 8, 3. Okay. The fantasy scenery was not this hard to assemble because it was easier just to find the bits that I was trying to assemble. 7. It doesn't say which sheet of cardboard you want. Oh. I'm going to come back to it. I will find those at some point and come back to it. I've managed to find part of the exhaust vents. So that's 3A. And somewhere I just found 3B. So I'm going to press on with that. That's 3B.
Do what you can find. And then
Yes. See what's left at the end.
Later.
Wow, these are weird. Because these then go on the outside of the giant crash spaceship, don't they? That's why you have to build them.
Yeah.
Okay. Ugh. This is such a weird shaped piece. Just for the camera. That is such a weird shaped piece. I'm going to put that to one side for a minute.
It's almost... You see the reason they got rid of this card stock scenery.
You need like an arts degree or an archaeology, an architecture degree to build this stuff.
Yeah, it is really nice stuff, and it comes pre-colored in, so you don't have to paint it, and it is beautiful. It's not quite as robust as the plastic scenery, barring those plastic trees.
I think this collar. Oh my god! Talk about tiny tabs. Okay, I'm never going to complain about the Goliath from Necromunda's cigar again, because the cardboard tabs on this are just as minuscule and less durable.
Yeah, that's another problem with this cardstock scenery. It's like you can't be rough with it because it's just card. It's quite nice, thick card, but it's still...
It is decent quality, but it's fiddly as all fuck.
This is also... I hate to think how old this cardboard now is as well. It might have had a bit more spring when it was first printed. But
right, I'm going to just do one side of this at a time because it's going to need to dry, but that gives me more time to talk about the rest of the scenery of 40k while this is drying. So
there's still a lot to get through.
We're only as far as 3rd ed 40k at the moment. Right, so we've covered the terrible trees, we've covered the gothic ruins that they released. We've covered the sandbags. Next thing then, as far as I'm aware, is there's nothing else that comes out in terms of scenery bits that is specifically 40k, let me stress. I know there were various innovations in terms of hills and stuff like that came out. There was nothing else that came out scenery-wise during this era until we hit, I think it's probably a 4th or 5th ed 40k, which is when we got a couple of really interesting bits. It was 5th ed 40k that Planet Strike launched. You've built that. Okay, which bit's that? That's the bit that I couldn't even find.
That's the engine.
That is the engine that I couldn't find. Okay.
I've got the boxy bit in the engine.
You're ahead of me. I've got this, which I'm just kind of desperately holding on at the moment. So Planet Strike, as far as I'm aware, the next big innovation in 40k terrain was when Planet Strike launched, which was during 5th ed 40k. Planet Strike was a supplement that they released as a different way to play 40k. So the idea was, much like they'd done Warhammer Siege during 5th and 6th edition Fantasy, what if you were to play a Siege game in 40k? What if you were to have, a player with defensive positions, and one player was the defender, and they got X amount of points to spend on defensive stuff like anti-aircraft guns and trench lines and stuff like that, and the other player was the attacker, and they got to spend stuff on orbital bombardments and drop assault launches and stuff. To that end, Games Workshop, and that's just come unglued, released a whole bunch of scenery that was specifically aimed at the release of Planet Strike. So this featured essentially, I don't imagine what was it called? The Aegis Assault Wall. So essentially it was an upgraded version of these. It was a plastic trench line that was deployable and it stood up on its own because it was kind of ribbly in terms of its shape. I've got a piece of it down here. Let me grab some.
It's what's informed the
there we go.
Existing
ribbly stuff.
The like hex based trenches.
Yeah,
which we'll get onto. But this is where it started for those.
This is where it started, and you got in individual sections like this that you could use to make kind of rounded corners, and then longer straight sections, which I will show you on just a moment. But alongside this, they released a plastic bastion kit, which you can still get today. It makes a really funky kind of tower shaped. Essentially, it's the 40k version of this.
It really is, isn't it?
It is. It's a 4-sided tower with a door at the bottom, but it came with heavy bolters around the outside. And then
it was also really nicely modular because you could build it with the middle section of the sort of tower bit.
Yep.
You could take that out and just have essentially a really short tower with with a platform on top, and then you could put it on a different one and have a really tall tower.
I'm going to show you how modular it is now. So I'm going to move my bits that are not entirely gluing to one side. Here we go. So I bought a whole bunch of these, and I built. It's somewhat knackered now. Move those bits to one side. this. This is what happens if you buy a lot of Bastion kits and other terrain kits that Games Workshop produced at the time, and you glue them all together and you paint it up in, essentially it was trying to emulate the colours of the battle of the Firebase, so it's blues and blacks and metallics. But yeah, this was the fort that I built for a Planet Strike campaign weekend that we ran here in Reading down at the Spiky Club, and it's been sat in a shed for quite a while, and bits of it have fallen off, and it is covered in dust. And yeah, it is in desperate need of either some TLC or just being taken out and shot. But yeah,
it'll buff out.
Get a little hammer just going ding 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 to tap it out. I think this looks like what happens after you try to buff it out. But yes, this is it's one of those things as well. I don't know what to do with this now. Back then, you could make rules for kind of awesome fortresses and stuff, but there isn't really any version of this in the current ethos of 40k. There's nothing rules-wise that I can use this as. So that's why it's been sat in a shed for quite so long, and why it's covered in cobwebs and dust and spiders. I'm going to move that to one side. But at around the same time that this came out, they also released, this is all that's left of mine has seen better days, the Sky Shield landing pad, which, much like the Firebase, had the landing pad on the side and then a central kind of fortress tower. You could build essentially your own version of it. Here, this came with legs. My legs got cannibalized to make a viaduct for my City Fight board. But they released the Sky Shield landing pad, and there was also around that time they'd released the City Fight rules. So they'd released rules for fighting games in kind of the urban environment, 40k, and to that end they released a whole bunch of city terrain. I've got, again, chunks of it. So here is my chapel that I made.
We've skipped a generation.
Which bit have I missed?
Of the City Fight terrain.
Which City Fight terrain did I miss?
Because there was the first modular set, which the pieces were only about this big.
You mean
and
this
there
one?
was little. The reason I remember it really well is there are little triangular prism wall runs, or a little that stuff. I'm sure that came out before Planet Strike.
I think you're right. I think this did. I think City Fight came out 4th edition 40k, and they released this, which there was 3 sets. So there was the Administratum, there was the Ecclesiarchy one, and then there was the Mechanicus one. And I've got all of them. I mean, I've got a City Fight board, which I need to paint at some point. much of everything, I need to paint it. If I didn't have a day job, my stuff would be painted.
Changeable, so you could build buildings with all sorts of random goodies in it.
So I've used parts of the Administratum bit on the front of my chapel to make this kind of little balcony bit, so that I have somewhere for my preacher to stand and yell at the masses before he gets shot by a sniper.
Those are the really sharp little bits at the end of the on the front where you've got the tiny little wall above your door, like those things that will murder you. Yes. Because when City Fight comes out, you build a big City Fight board. And it's like, okay, now I've got to reach in and I'm bleeding. Just
die from blood loss. We mentioned the Necromunda bulkheads. I've got some of mine. Yeah, there we go. Bulkheads. Yeah. There we go.
That looks like being cut down.
Glue is already giving up on my air vent. Yet more Pritt stick on there to try and get it to stick. Suspect that yours is going to get built far better than mine by the end of this.
Well, I've got the problem of too much super glue or too little super glue. Either it doesn't hold, or suddenly everything is stuck to everything. I'm not
sticking to me more than it is to the cardboard. Stick there. Should have got my 8-year-old to come and do this. She's far more better trained with Pritt sticks than I am. Right, I'll just hold those for a minute while we talk about more scenery stuff before you. So yeah, we've got that the wrong way around. It was City Fight that came out, and actually there were 2 versions of the City Fight rules that came out. There was the City Fight rules that came out with the 3rd edition 40k rulebook, which didn't come with any additional terrain, but did feature a guide on how to build your own. Then there was the City Fight rules update that came out with 4th edition 40k, which was when they released that modular scenery set. And it was after that Planet Strike came out, and we got the update with the Bastion and the defense line. I think that's up to date. Around that time, I'm just going to put that there, keep holding that. So much like I mentioned in the previous video, that they released tiles that you could game on, which were kind of sculpted with hills and valleys and stuff. You could arrange something like a valley or a hill. They did much the same thing for 40k, except they were just flat-ish. So they did
roads.
They did roads, and they had gutters that would swallow your dice, so that your dice never wanted to lay straight when you roll on this thing. But they did, for the purposes of city fight terrain, they did a city fight board, which your stuff could sit on. There we are, now at the corner of 12th and Main, and we'll put the chapel over there. And it does something look quite cool.
That's not the first road they released.
No,
there was a horrific.
The roller mat one.
Yeah, it was like, I'm trying to think of what material it was. It was vinyl. It was like vinyl flooring. You know the.
It was lino, basically. It was lino. Like lino.
Yeah.
They released a roll of road that you could roll out, and then it would just kind of undulate across the board without ever sitting flat. That was released during Third Ed. It didn't let us stay around for long because it was just so useless. Yeah, actually, to be fair, we're talking about stuff that we've missed. There is something fairly vital we've missed. I'm going to go grab mine now. Bear with me.
I realised something else we've missed. It might be the same thing.
Quite possibly one of the most epic pieces of scenery, that yet at the same time useless pieces of scenery that they ever released. But it's beautiful, and I've still got mine. Still in its box, still with the price tag on. It's the Chapel of Sanctuary.
So the one that I realised we missed is epic for all the opposite reasons.
Go on, what's that one?
That is a lovely piece of scenery.
But useless. You can't use it in a game. It's just it serves no gameful purpose.
It's a good blocking an area piece of terrain, because from what I remember, you can't really put people on it very easily.
I use mine for photo shoots sometimes. That's all I use mine for.
They did release,
polystyrene.
And I think we've already gone past the date they released it. The Alien Jungle scenery.
Oh no, hang on, no, the one that was a really weird spiky scenery.
No. The stuff that you can still get if you just go to your local fish shop and buy the aquarium plants.
You mean the time when they packaged aquarium plants into a box and claimed it was 40k scenery? Yes, I do remember.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, Games Workshop have given me a hobby that I have loved for years and years and years. There are some times when I look at what they've done and go like, really?
Yes, there have been some hits and some misses, especially when it comes to scenery. And actually, thinking about it, there are more hits in fantasy scenery than there were in 40k scenery. There were more misses in the 40k scenery, I think. Yeah, the Chapel of Sanctuary. So here's mine. It came with these beautiful kind of acetate sheet stained glass windows, and then the whole thing was pre-sculpted with kind of a ruined sanctuary with a broken aquila, some bullet shells on it, a dead space marine kind of jutting out under the rubble. I've painted the floor of mine, and I touched up because it was originally the same stone colour as the rest of the building, but I painted mine so it has a slightly more contrasting light grey and picked out gold on the aquila, and I've painted the marine as a blood angel, because why not? But yes, this was an awesome piece of scenery that they released that I love it, but it serves no practical purpose when it comes to gaming because models simply will not stand on it. It's like someone told the designer, make a beautiful piece of scenery, and then nobody ever told him it was actually for use in a war game. There we go. Chapel of Sanctuary. I couldn't believe I missed that out. And actually, the aquarium plants, you're right. Those are worthy of mention in the Hall of Fame of, really? They did that?
Yeah.
Moving on then, hurtling on now into the slightly more up-to-date scenery that they released. And I say it's slightly more up-to-date. This is still some of the stuff that, albeit it doesn't seem like it was released that long ago, they're already in the process of replacing some of it. So after the Planet Strike scenery, and perhaps kind of to complement that, as we get into 6th edition 40k and then 7th edition 40k, they release... Oh, hang on. What we should mention, 6th edition 40k. So the 4th edition 40k starter box did come with scenery, didn't it? The 4th edition starter box came with the wrecked aquila.
Yes.
I don't have that. I don't know if you've got... I mean, you've got most things kicking around in the box. Do you have that one?
I don't think I ever actually bought... because that was the Battle for Macragge.
It was the Battle for Macragge set. Think about it. There's there's a lot more scenery that they produced, especially for the starter sets for 40K than they did for fantasy, because the fantasy sets really didn't come with that much in the way of scenery. I mean, there was the Grudge pony and the little shrine that came with, I think, the 7th edition fantasy starter box. But in terms of I think 40K,
there was also a little dwarf wall, I think, that came along with that. But,
there was, yes.
I think in terms of actual gaming, if you play on Planet Bowling Ball with no scenery, fantasy worked. It wasn't necessarily as balanced because certain armies with lots of shooting were
dwarfs,
pleasant. Dwarfs, wood elves.
In
fact, just elves.
But in fact, wood elves will just bring their own woods anyway, as Murray will have to do at some point.
Yeah. Whereas in 40K, if you did that and you had an army that wasn't a shooting army, you're not doing well at all.
No.
You would.
No, I think I get that point.
So
Tyranids, for example, really benefit from having a board with a bit of terrain that they can skulk behind before they get up close.
Yeah. Orcs do as well, because yes, you might have some shooting, but that's more for giggles than
unless you pile your boys into a bunch of trucks, at which point you do like a Planet Bowling Ball that you can just hurtle across at full speed, screaming "wah" and shooting your gun in the air.
Yeah, or you do what I did, which was build a shooty orc army because I thought it would be funny, and then managed to shoot Murray's Imperial Guard army off the table with it.
But isn't that also partly because Murray's just terrible at 40K? I think that needs to dry, but that is one of the little kind of side mounting bits from the engine. Okay, that's the exhaust vent. Don't tell me what to do another one. I've got to do another one of these. I don't want to do another one of those right now.
There's 2 exhaust vents?
I think there's 2. I think there's 2. I thought I came across another one somewhere on the sprue here. Yeah, because there's another 3B here.
Oh, no, I didn't see that. Also, how do you glue?
Right, that is everything off of sprue 2 of 6, so that's going over there.
At least the tents look simple. I say
I'm
simple.
I should have started with the tents. Insert slot 9 into.
I'll go back and do the air duct that I forgot.
The vent, you mean? The engine vent?
No. The air duct.
Oh, this bit.
Yeah.
The one that I can't get to stay glued at the moment. Going back to 4th edition 40K. So when they released the starter box, then they almost kind of. They cheaped on how many models you got. You only got a single tactical squad of Marines in there, I think, and then 1 squad of Gene Stealers. But they bulked it out by giving you an awesome piece of terrain, which I will find a picture of and throw up here. So this is the crashed Imperial Aquila. The Aquila was a piece of terrain, a vehicle, actually, that Forge World was making at the time. And there is an apocryphal story, I have no idea how true this is, that several of the managers at Games Workshop went up onto one of the balconies in Forge World with fully constructed Imperial Aquilas and took it in turns to lob them off the balcony from various heights to see how many pieces they would break into, so they could work out what the optimum number of pieces for a crashed Aquila was. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. That's the story I heard. But that resulted in this crashed Aquila set that they released as part of the Battle for the Crag. And the idea then was you got this little kind of chapter serve for the briefcase who came with it, who was supposed to be the pilot or one of the passengers from the crashed Aquila. And then the tactical squad were deployed to try and rescue him from the Gene Stealer infestation. 5th edition starter box, though, which was Battle for Skull Pass. You did. You got your little it was like little beacons. I mean, I used them later on as a laser fence, but they were little kind of teleport homer beacons, weren't they? Is what they were supposed to be, and they were supposed to have them that the pilot would kind of. There were scenarios in the box. It doesn't matter. They did. You're right. They released those as part of it as well.
That's what I was thinking. That it was quite nice because it had all those scenarios in the box. It wasn't just a put 2 armies on the table fight. So yeah, yes, they may have cheaped out with the number of models, but they did make up for it with the scenery and the scenarios. So.
5th edition starter box, as far as I can recall, did not come with scenery. You got a lot more models in that. They really kind of bulked it out. So you got a whole Orc army in there. You got a whole Space Marine force in there, including vehicles, Dreadnought for the Marines and Death Copters for the Orcs. There was loads of stuff, but no scenery, as far as I can recall. Likewise, when they released the 6th edition 40K box, the Dark Vengeance set, that came with a bunch of models, but no scenery. And 7th edition, the starter box there, that was the re-release of the Dark Vengeance box, basically. They didn't do new models for that. So no scenery throughout any of those versions that I can recall. But in the intervening period, what we did get was a game called Shadow War Armageddon. And this was a weird game. It was like it was trying to be Necromunda without being Necromunda, and it was trying to be Kill Team before the days of Kill Team. I bought the box set, and I've got the rulebook, and I have got to confess, I've never even cracked the spine on the rulebook, because the only reason I bought the box set was I wanted the scenery that came with it. It came with a whole bunch of gantries and bits of industrial scenery, which I desperately wanted, both for my games of 40k and eventually later on for games of Necromunda when Necromunda were re-released. But yeah, I've got mine here. It's undercoated and sprayed, and there was the catwalky gantries that came with it as well that were basically exactly the same height. The only frustrating thing about this is it was a different height to the buildings. So you couldn't have a gantry that went from this floor to that floor. You had everything kind of on a slant, which is a little bit annoying.
It's one of the things that wound me up a little bit about the Games Workshop scenery is that it just seems to keep changing scale. And if they're just stuck with one, it would be really nice, because then you could just add to your collection and keep it going, rather than having, as you say, odd gantries at a slant so that you can go from one to the other.
Everything would have still been cross-compatible, essentially, I suppose, is what would have been nice then. But the other thing they released around then, and I've got it down here, like you referred to, they'd done the Aegis shield wall initially when they released Planet Strike. There was an upgrade that they released to that, which was the Wall of Martyrs defense line. And this was proper trench line. And it came with dugouts, so you could put I'm not put it all out of my box, but you had dugouts you could put at the end. You could have wavy line after line of trenches, and it came with bunkers that connected up to it as well. And these are actually my favourite thing that they released as part and parcel of that defence line series. I love the bunker model. There was almost kind of an arms race of scenery that began to happen at this point, where they released bigger and more fancy fortification pieces. And this was around the point of 7th edition 40k, when you could buy fortifications as part of the points cost of your army, essentially. And there were upscaled versions of this with like quad las cannons on the sides. There was a version of it that was a massive fortress with a huge, massive mega cannon, a macro cannon on it that was designed for firing on kind of shipboard defenses.
Oh, that was the one with the massive tower with the angel, like the Dark Angel symbol.
They released the Fortress of Redemption, which was a Dark Angel styled fortress, which is what for a long time I used my constructed fortress av, which had a missile silo on one side, it had a massive las cannon turret on the other, and then it had a huge central tower rising up the middle.
And you could fit an entire army in it. Like, its transport capacity, because you could garrison the building, was enough. You could fit an entire army into it, at which point it's essentially a big armored vehicle, like, for the opponent to deal with. It got a bit silly when some of the army designs came out, where it's like, I just put my entire army in it and good luck killing it.
As well, that was the time when they started releasing limited edition scenery, which was really weird. So they released a limited to 5 production only Void Shield generator, which was cast in resin. And if you were lucky enough to get one of those, I think the eventual resale value of them was over £1,000. It was ridiculous because they were so good in game that the tournament players wanted one, but you couldn't get them. And a lot of tournaments were only allowing you to use fortifications and stuff if it conformed to the exact model, because how else do you show what the footprint of that model is? They also released a limited edition plasma battery, which again I think was only limited to about 1,000 production, and again, that one went for stupid money as well. It was a giant mega plasma cannon that they released, and it sold out like that. It got silly, and I was doing tournaments and campaigns at the time, and I was having to put all manner of rules and restrictions in regarding fortifications, because it was very quickly becoming a siege game. Essentially, every game was a siege game. I can't find the missing bit of cardboard that I need for that, so I'm going to just skip on and build a tent. I think tents might be easier to build.
I think with the scenery, it seemed to really hit or miss. Like, pieces were either pretty much pointless to actually take in your army, or they were ridiculous. And as I say, tournament players would be all over them.
Yeah.
And but there was very little in between where it's like it was just a fun bit to pick up and have in your army as play around. It was just a case of it might have just been the people I played with at the time, but non-tournament players at the time just didn't buy scenery.
I bought some, but only really for use in games of Apocalypse and stuff. So the trench line that I got and the bunker, which I thought was just a lovely model, I bought that purely for games of Apocalypse because I wanted some cool scenery for us to fight over. Which is probably why most of my series not painted.
Rules for it, or did you just use it because it was cool scenery?
We did, but the few times that we used the rules, we did it, but anybody could occupy it. So you could take a bunker away from somebody and to take control of we didn't have the plasma storm battery or any of that stuff, but you could take control of certain bits of scenery and then whoever held it got the benefit of it, which I think is a nice way to balance it out.
Yeah. Because there was a cheaper version of the weapons battery, which was basically a Lehman Russ turret.
Yes.
On a mount. And I think they came in pairs, but it was, and this is where it's either really good or it's really bad, because I'm pretty sure they were ballistic skill 5 and had to shoot the nearest target.
Yeah.
Which is then like, okay, if they're really cheap, that'd be quite cool. No, they're about the same price as a Lehman Russ. Why?
So why wouldn't you just have a Lehman Russ?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just one of those like.
If I could
things
do that,
were either
why would
the
I
plasma
not
storm
just
battery,
take
which
the
just
Russ?
deleted units, or they were these things where even orcs were looking them and going, "That's poor shooting."
Can I make it go 36 inches across the board whilst I'm inside it screaming? Then no, I don't want one.
Yeah.
But so that takes us as far as 7th ed. As far as I can tell, that's up to date with what was available at that point. Moving on to 8th edition 40k, and that, of course, was a huge change to the rules. They didn't come, again, as far as I can recall, the scenery, the starter box didn't come with any scenery. So that was the one that came with the Death Guard and the advent of the Primaris Marines, but there was no terrain that I can remember that came in that box.
Not that I can remember either.
Tiny, tiny orcs. Oh, hi. Yeah, there's still like another 40 minutes left on this video, so join me next week for part 2 of Warhammer 40k Terrain, where we'll carry on through 8th edition and onwards and beyond. We'll talk about some of our favourite bits of 40k Terrain. Please, in the meantime, give us a subscribe so you don't miss part 2. Bye for now.